It was supposed to be a break from everything. Pause. Just a weekend of silence, fresh pine air, and no notifications. That's all I wanted. The ad said, remote cabin. Quiet. Peaceful. No cell service, perfect for disconnecting. That's what caught my eye. I had spent the last 6 months drowning in emails, deadlines, and the suffocating routine of a London flat with walls thinner than paper. I needed air. And silence. God, I craved silence. So when I found the listing for a secluded cabin in the depths of rural Northumberland, nestled in the woods where even GPS dared not tread, I booked it instantly. The drive up was unsettling. Winding roads, no signs, and trees that leaned in just a little too close. My tires crunched over gravel as I pulled up to the cabin. A quaint wooden structure, 2 stories, a dark red roof faded by weather, and windows like blank eyes staring into the forest. There were no other cabins nearby. No neighbors. Just me and the trees. I stepped inside. It smelled of old pine, dust, and something faintly metallic, like blood or ink. The furniture was rustic but clean. A stone fireplace sat cold and waiting. A single bulb swung slowly from the ceiling, as if someone had just walked past it. But no one had. I was alone. Or so I thought. A welcome note lay on the wooden kitchen table. It was handwritten in neat cursive. Welcome to your retreat. Please sign the guest book. Fireplace wood is stacked in the shed. Water from the pump is drinkable. No cell service here, enjoy the silence. Underneath the note was the guest book. An old, leather-bound journal, its cover cracked with age. The pages inside were filled with entries, some recent, some decades old. At first it felt quaint. Sweet even. A couple who visited in 1993 had scribbled a little heart next to their names. A solo hiker in 2008 wrote about how he found clarity here. Then there were pages that felt off. One entry simply read, "The woods don't want you to leave." Another, dated only a month before my arrival, was scribbled in frantic, uneven handwriting. I heard my name last night. I was alone. Don't ignore the sounds. I chuckled nervously and shook it off. Ghost stories. People trying to be clever. I wrote my name on a fresh page. Ethan Blackwell. June 2nd, 2025. Here for peace and quiet. Hope the foxes don't eat me. I put the pen down. The ink didn't soak into the page like normal. It sat wet, glossy, refusing to dry. That night, the silence was suffocating. No hum of electricity. No traffic. No faint city rumble. Just the wind whispering through the trees and the occasional groan of wooden beams settling in. I made a fire and sat with a mug of tea watching the flames dance. At around 11:47 p.m. I heard it. A creak upstairs. A very human creak. I froze. The kind of freeze where your breath catches and your skin goes cold. It wasn't the house shifting. This was movement. Slow. Deliberate. I grabbed the poker from the fireplace and crept upstairs. The staircase moaned with each step. I opened the bedroom door. Nothing. Just the bed, the nightstand, and my open suitcase. I checked the closet. Empty. But as I turned to leave, I noticed something that hadn't been there before. The guest book. It was lying on the bed. I hadn't brought it up. I was sure I had left it downstairs on the table. I picked it up slowly. Its cover felt warm. Almost alive. The page I had signed was still open. But now, underneath my entry, another name had appeared. Written in the same ink, still glistening wet. Daniel Rook. June 3rd, 2025. I never left. I blinked. That date was tomorrow. I flipped the page back and forth, checking if it was a smear or mistake. But the ink sat there, untouched. Fresh. Like someone had just signed it moments before. My heart thudded against my ribs. I rushed back downstairs, gripping the book tight. Maybe I was being paranoid. Maybe it was some twisted joke by the owner. I tried to call. No signal. Just as expected. I turned on the old radio in the corner. Static. Nothing. Then a whisper. Faint. Almost lost beneath the fuzz. Ethan. I slammed the radio off. Nope. I wasn't doing this. I grabbed my keys and bolted for the door. But when I swung it open, the forest had changed. It was darker. Thicker. The gravel road I had driven up was gone, replaced with wild underbrush and gnarled roots. I stepped back. The air was colder now. Heavier. I shut the door and locked it. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat by the fire, staring at the guest book. I flipped through every entry. Names. Dates. Some cheerful. Some terrified. Many from decades ago. But the last 5 entries, they were different. The handwriting varied wildly, like each person had written in a frenzy. Ink splattered. Pages torn. One read, "Don't fall asleep. They come when you're vulnerable." Another, "I heard footsteps above me. But the attic has no floor." Then this one, scrawled in the margin, "There is no owner. The cabin finds you." And finally, just one word, etched deep into the page. Run. At dawn I packed everything. I shoved clothes into my bag, grabbed the keys, and tried the door again. This time the woods looked normal. The road was back. Birds chirped. Had I imagined it all? A stress hallucination? Still, I didn't care. I got in the car and started the engine. But when I looked in the rearview mirror, the cabin was gone. No joke, just gone. Like it had never been there. I stopped the car. Got out. Walked back up the path I knew had led to the front porch. Only trees. I looked down at my bag. The guest book was in it. And it was open. Another entry had appeared. Daniel Rook. June 3, 2025. He's coming back. My blood turned to ice. The next page was blank. But as I watched, swear to God, the ink began to form on its own. Ethan Blackwell. June 4, 2025. He tried to leave. But the woods remember. I slammed the book shut. But deep in the forest I heard it. A whisper. Ethan. I should have driven straight to the nearest town. Found a cafe, sat among strangers, and forced the whole thing out of my head. Instead, I parked on the roadside about 10 miles out and just sat there, staring at the guest book on the passenger seat like it might explode. The last entry was still there. My name. Today's date. He tried to leave. But the woods remember. I didn't write that. I swear on every breath I've taken, I didn't write that. And yet the ink was dry. A perfect match for my handwriting. Neat. Slightly slanted. Like a signature I'd forgotten giving. The problem was, I wasn't entirely sure I hadn't written it. Something about the cabin, those woods, had slipped inside my head. A dream I couldn't shake. Or worse, a memory I hadn't lived yet. It wasn't just haunting. It was rewriting me. I had to know. I turned the car around. It was dusk when I reached the edge of where the cabin should have been. I parked again, grabbed a flashlight and the guest book, and stepped into the trees. The forest was quieter than before. No bird song. No wind. Just the rhythmic crunch of my boots over damp leaves and the low buzz of something alive. Not insects. Not animals. A hum beneath the world, like the woods themselves were breathing. Listening. The flashlight flickered. Once. Twice. And then, suddenly, there it was. The cabin. Exactly where it had been before. Sitting calmly in the clearing like it had never vanished. Like it had waited for me. The porch light was on. I hadn't left any lights on. A bitter cold crept up my spine as I approached. The door stood ajar. Not wide open, just cracked as if someone had gone inside a moment ago and forgotten to close it. I pushed it open. The fire was already lit. It crackled warmly, filling the space with soft orange light. But the logs were fresh. Not burned through. Still full-bodied. Someone had lit this within the last hour. Hello? I called, my voice smaller than I intended. Silence. Then, footsteps above me. I froze. They were slow. Barefoot. One step, pause, another step. I didn't move. I just stood there, staring up at the ceiling as something, or someone, walked slowly across the floor above. I wanted to run. But something held me still. Not fear exactly, more like expectation. Like part of me wanted to know what waited upstairs. The sound stopped. I climbed the stairs, each creak loud enough to be a gunshot. At the top, the hallway was dark. My flashlight was useless, flickering and dim like it was choking on the very air. The bedroom door was open. Inside, the room looked the same as before. Except for one thing. The mirror above the dresser. It was fogged. As though someone had just stepped out of a shower, but the cabin had no plumbing for that. Just a hand pump outside. And then, slowly, letters appeared in the fog. Written by an unseen finger. He's already here. I backed away, pulse hammering in my ears. Something moved behind me. I spun, nothing there. But when I turned back, the mirror was clear again. Normal. As if it had never changed. I ran downstairs. The guest book was lying on the table again. I hadn't left it there. I opened it. Another name had been added. Daniel Rook. June 3, 2025. I told him not to come back. This time there was no wet ink. It was bone dry. Like it had always been there. But what truly rattled me, truly froze the air in my lungs, was the page before it. My own entry. It had changed. Now read. Ethan Blackwell. June 2, 2025. He left. He returned. The woods don't forget. The guest book was writing my story before I could live it. I snapped it shut. Something was outside the window. A shape. Human-sized. Watching. I grabbed the flashlight and crept to the curtain. Slowly I peeled it back. Nothing. Just trees. But when I turned around, the door was wide open. And standing in the doorway was a man. Tall. Thin. Gaunt features as though carved from pale wood. His eyes were black. Not shadowed, entirely black. No whites. No light. He was wearing a flannel shirt, torn at the shoulder, soaked with something dark. Mud maybe. Or worse. In his hand was a pen. The exact pen I had used to sign the guest book. I didn't move. Couldn't move. He lifted the pen and pointed it at me. Then, in a voice like dry leaves scraping over concrete, he whispered, "You signed. You belong." And just like that, he was gone. Vanished. No sound. No footsteps. Just empty air. I grabbed the guest book and bolted outside. The forest swallowed me. I don't remember how long I ran. Time doesn't behave normally in those woods. It stretches and snaps like old elastic. I stumbled into a clearing. Not the cabins. A different one. In the center was a stone circle. Ancient. Covered in moss and strange carvings that pulsed faintly in the dark. And there, lying in the middle of the stones, was another guest book. Identical to mine. I picked it up, trembling. Inside, the entries were different. June 1st, 1996. Simon Callow. I heard my wife, but she's been dead 12 years. October 4th, 1973. Marianne Blake. The forest let me leave once. It won't again. February 12th, 1938. Thomas Crowthorne. It writes the ending before you know it's begun. Pages and pages. Lives recorded. Some crossed out. Some bleeding into the margins. Stories of screams in the trees, shadows that mimic voices that beg and lie. I turned to the last page. It was blank. And then ink began to bloom across it. Right in front of me. No hand. No pen. Just letters carving themselves like they were being pulled from the fabric of the page. Ethan Blackwell. June 4th, 2025. He's in the forest now. He saw too much. I dropped the book and ran. The forest laughed behind me. Branches reached for me like hands. The ground sloped unnaturally as though it shifted to mislead me. I tripped. Fall. Rolled down a muddy incline into darkness. When I opened my eyes, I was back at the cabin. Firelight glowing from the windows. No footsteps. No voices. Just stillness. The door creaked open. And sitting on the table were two guest books. One was mine. The other was blank. Waiting. I didn't step inside right away. I stood at the edge of the porch, breathing heavily, soaked in sweat and something else I didn't want to identify. The woods had spat me out like a swallowed secret. I should have left. I should have burned the cabin to the ground. But the moment I saw those two guest books lying side by side on the table inside, something in me cracked. One was the book I'd signed, aged, worn, alive. The other was pristine. Clean. Unmarked. Waiting. I stepped over the threshold like a man re-entering a dream he swore he'd woken from. The fire crackled gently, like it had been burning for hours without fuel. The room smelled of pine and smoke and old paper. And blood. Faint like a whisper. Metallic, clinging to the air. The two books rested in the same position I'd left them minutes, or maybe hours, before. No dust. No sign of disturbance. As if time had folded into itself and I'd never left. I approached the table slowly. The old guest book was open to my page. Ethan Blackwell. June 4th, 2025. He's in the forest now. He saw too much. But underneath that, a new entry had formed. Daniel Rook. June 4th, 2025. He watched Ethan through the mirror. He remembers. I dropped into the chair, heart pounding. My eyes drifted toward the hallway where the bedroom mirror waited. Cold dread curled around my spine like ivy. Daniel Rook. The name kept reappearing. He was in the guest book before I arrived. He signed it for tomorrow's date. He told me not to come back. And now he'd watched me. Through the mirror. I couldn't ignore it any longer. I grabbed the flashlight, checked the batteries, and crept up the stairs. Each step felt like a heartbeat. At the top, the hallway was dark, dense, like the shadows were thicker than they should be. The bedroom door stood open, swaying gently. No breeze. Just motion. Inside the room was unchanged. Neatly made bed. My duffel bag untouched. Curtains drawn. But the mirror, oh God, the mirror, was pulsing. I swear it was breathing. A low fog hung across the glass, like something was breathing against it from the other side. I stepped closer. The surface trembled. Not my reflection. Not this time. A man stood behind the glass, staring directly at me. Tall, thin, hollow-cheeked, pale eyes that glowed faintly. His hands were pressed flat against the glass as if trying to push through. His mouth moved, slowly, syllables forming in silence. I leaned in. He mouthed one word, "Run." And then his hand moved. He pointed. Not at me, behind me. I spun around, flashlight raised, but the room was empty. Just me in the mirror. I turned back. The man was gone. Only my reflection remained, pale and shaken. But as I stared, my reflection didn't move. It stood still, frozen, while I breathed and panicked and stepped back. And then, slowly, it smiled. I didn't. I ran. Down the stairs. Nearly tripped. The flashlight clattered to the floor. I burst out the front door and into the forest, lungs burning. But the trees had changed again. They were closer now. Leaning in. Bark blackened like fire had touched them. And then, the whispers returned. So soft. Like wind over bones. Ethan. Don't run. He's waiting. I turned wildly in every direction. Shadows danced at the corners of my vision. My legs moved on instinct alone, carrying me deeper into the nightmare. And that's when I found it. A third guest book. This one was pinned to a tree with a rusted nail. Its pages fluttered gently, untouched by wind. I opened it, hand shaking. There was only one entry. Daniel Rook. June 5, 2025. I was like you once. I thought I could leave. I thought I had a choice. Below that, in fresher ink, was this. Ethan Blackwell. June 6, 2025. He looked too long into the mirror. Now he wears someone else's face. That date hadn't happened yet. But it would. The forest was writing my future before I lived it. I snapped the book shut, heart thudding in my ears. I didn't know what to believe anymore. What was real, what was imagined, what the hell Daniel Rook was or had become. But something clicked into place. A theory. A desperate thread of logic in a maze of madness. The mirror wasn't a window. It was a doorway. I returned to the cabin one last time. I wasn't thinking straight. Or maybe I was. Either way, I needed to end it, break the pattern, shatter the rules. I was done playing guest in someone else's story. The mirror waited in the bedroom, shimmering slightly now, even without fog. I approached slowly, every nerve in my body screaming at me to stop. I raised my hand. My reflection did not. I touched the glass. It was warm. Like skin. And then, it pulled. Not a force. Not a gust. It was like I slipped. And suddenly, I wasn't in the cabin anymore. The world on the other side was darker. Same room. Same bed. Same curtains. But everything was off. Skewed. Like a photograph with the contrast cranked too high. Shadows were longer. Colors were drained. The air buzzed faintly like a bad frequency. And I wasn't alone. Daniel stood in the corner. Smiling. You came through, he said softly. His voice was human. Almost kind. But there was something hollow underneath. Like his words were being remembered instead of spoken. Where am I? I asked, barely trusting my voice. He tilted his head. Where everyone goes once the cabin chooses them. I didn't choose anything. You signed the book. That's all it takes. He stepped closer. Every name in that guest book, every page, they all came through eventually. Some tried to fight it. Some embraced it. But once you see the cabin's face, it remembers you. I want out, I whispered. There is no out, he said. Only in. The question is, will you write or be written? He held up a pen. My pen. The same one from the table. He placed it in my hand. The moment it touched my skin, I felt everything. All the memories of those who had come before. The screams. The running. The mirrors. The stories. They weren't being recorded. They were being written. Not by people, but by the cabin. By the woods. It didn't want guests. It wanted stories. And I was the next chapter. I woke up on the floor of the cabin. Fire out. Books gone. Mirrors shattered. But the forest outside was quiet. Gentle. Like nothing had ever happened. My phone buzzed. No signal. But the date had changed. June 6, 2025. Just like the entry said. I stood, slowly, and looked into the broken mirror. My reflection stared back. It smiled. And I smiled with it. But the smile wasn't mine. The smile in the mirror didn't belong to me. It stretched too wide. Lips pulled like puppet strings. Teeth just a little too perfect, too white, like porcelain made to mimic human decay. And the worst part? I was smiling too. Helpless. Synced like a puppet to its puppeteer. When I finally tore my gaze away, I felt hollow inside. like something important had been scooped out of me and left behind in the reflection. I backed away from the shattered mirror, each crunch of glass beneath my boots another reminder that something had crossed over with me. Or maybe, instead of me. The mirror wasn't just broken. It was empty, like it had let something out. Back downstairs the air had changed. Heavy. Saturated with the scent of mold and old paper. And blood. That smell again, sharp and metallic so thick I could taste it. The fire was out, yet the room remained warm. Unnaturally warm. The guest books were gone. But a new object lay waiting on the table. A fountain pen, its nib dipped in something that wasn't ink. Beside it, a single page. Fresh. White. But already stained red. My name was written at the top in elegant, flowing script. Ethan Blackwell. Chapter 4, The Writing Begins. I didn't write that. But the pen was still wet. My hand tingled as I picked it up. A pulse behind my eyes. A rhythm I didn't recognize. And then I heard it, felt it. A whisper. Coming from the page. I leaned closer. The letters rearranged themselves. Ethan Blackwell. He stopped running. He became the pen. I dropped it. Stumbled back. The room shifted. Wood groaned underfoot. The walls pulsed gently like a heartbeat in the timber. Bookshelves I hadn't noticed before lined the walls now, filled with volumes thick and leather-bound, titles burned into the spines. Each book had a name. Daniel Rook. Simon Callow. Marianne Blake. And dozens more. Hundreds. Maybe thousands. Each a person. A life. Trapped and printed. Stories the cabin had claimed. Was I next? I yanked a random book off the shelf. Daniel's. The leather was hot to the touch. I flipped to the first page. He came seeking solitude. But the woods had watched him long before he arrived. His words were not his own. His ending was already inked. The pages turned by themselves, fast, too fast, as if eager to reach the end. I tried to stop them but they burned my fingers. When the book closed I heard a voice behind me. He thought he could rewrite the story. I turned. Daniel stood at the doorway. His skin was dull now. Waxy. His eyes no longer glowed. They were empty. Black holes sunk deep into his skull. His clothes were the same as before but older. Tattered. Like he'd been wearing them for decades. You escaped once, I said quietly. You warned me. He smiled weakly. No one escapes. Not really. I'm just another draft. He stepped closer. You're being written, Ethan. Even now. Every move you make, every thought, every fear, it's all being copied. Transcribed. The cabin takes you apart word by word. He reached out, touched my shoulder. You can still choose how it ends. I stared at him. How? He pointed to the firewood basket. Beneath the kindling was something wrapped in canvas. I pulled it out slowly. An axe. The handle was worn, etched with names, dozens, maybe hundreds, all scratched out. At the base, one word remained. Author. I didn't ask questions. I carried the axe outside into the woods. The trees were closer now. Suffocating. As if trying to stop me. Branches scraped at my arms. Whispers filled the air. Don't. He's writing. Burn. They weren't threats. They were pleas. I didn't care. I found the stone circle again, the place where the second guest book had appeared. The ancient runes around it glowed faintly now, pulsing red like veins. In the center, a wooden post had risen from the ground. Tied to it was another version of me. Eyes stitched shut. Lips moving without sound. The whispers swirled louder. I stepped forward, trembling. The tied version of me turned its head. Mouth opened. It spoke. You're not the original, it rasped. You're just the draft that survived. My hand shook. I raised the axe. It didn't scream. It just smiled. And then I brought the blade down, not on it but on the post. The stone circle cracked. The runes burned white hot. And the forest screamed. The trees writhed. The cabin groaned. Fire erupted from the roots, climbing upward like liquid flame. The guest books, the shelves, the mirror, all of it went up in smoke. The sky cracked open with thunder. And then, silence. Ash settled. The cabin was gone. Just a blackened clearing remained. The axe lay in the center, glowing faintly. I picked it up. Carved freshly into the handle, below the word author, was a second word. Escape. I woke in my car. Parked at the edge of the woods. Morning light filtered through the windshield. Everything felt normal. No blood. No whispers. No smoke. Just quiet. The guest book was gone. So was the pen. But a slip of paper lay on the passenger seat. I opened it. In handwriting identical to mine it read, The forest remembers Ethan. You burn the story. But not the author. I never went back. But sometimes at night I hear it, that faint scratching sound. Like a pen on paper. Writing. Waiting. They say if you destroy a haunted place, the ghosts go with it. But what if the place was never the problem? What if you are? I hadn't returned to the forest since the fire. I kept my distance, lived quietly, moved cities. Changed my phone number. Never wrote anything longer than a shopping list. The axe, once etched with my name, I buried in cement and dumped off a pier. I didn't tell a soul what happened. Not even in therapy. And for a while I believed I'd escaped. But stories? They don't end just because the book burns. The scratching started a few nights after I moved into my new flat. Soft at first. Like rats in the walls. But there were no rats. Only pages. Slipped under my door. One at a time. Always blank. Until they weren't. The first time writing appeared, it spelled just 2 words. Still writing. I ignored it. Ripped the page. Burned it. The next night I received 2 pages. Then 3. Until finally one bore my handwriting again, the same as in the cabin. Only this time the ink was red. He burned the story. But forgot the storyteller. I checked every corner of the apartment. Nothing. No cameras. No trick. Just paper. Always waiting. And then I saw the guest book again. In my kitchen. Lying open on the counter like it had never been gone. Its pages fluttered in a windless room. I didn't sign it. I never signed it. Not again. But it was already there, ink still wet. Ethan Blackwell. Final entry. June 10, 2025. He came full circle. But the circle was never broken. I tried leaving. I packed a bag, got in my car, drove until my phone lost signal, which wasn't long. That's when the signs started showing up. Literally. On the road. Welcome back, Ethan. You never left. Write. Or be written. I drove faster. But somehow, every turn led me back to the same forest road. The same rusted sign pointing to Cabin Hollow, 2 miles. I slammed the brakes. This was impossible. The cabin had burned to the ground. I watched it crumble. I felt it die. But something remained. Or had been waiting all along. Dusk crept in like a predator. I didn't remember falling asleep, but when I opened my eyes, I was no longer in the car. I was sitting at the cabin's table. The same table. The fire was crackling. The mirror on the wall was whole. The guest book rested before me, open and breathing. And I was holding the pen. My hand moved on its own. I tried to drop the pen, I couldn't. Tried to scream, couldn't. My mouth moved in rhythm with the pen. I wrote. He returned to end it. But the story had already ended him. And then something changed. The mirror didn't show me anymore. It showed a forest without trees. A sky without stars. A cabin made of ink and bone. And within it, every version of me. Some crying. Some screaming. One laughing without sound over and over. All trapped. All written. Daniel Rook stepped out of the mirror. Only it wasn't him anymore. He had no face now. Just smooth, pale skin, as if the cabin had erased all identity, leaving only the vessel. He spoke without lips. You wanted an ending. But endings are for readers. You are the ink. I backed away, but the room was gone. I was standing on a blank page. A void stretching in every direction, lined with endless parchment. Footsteps left words instead of prints. Every breath etched a paragraph. And behind me the cabin loomed, built from sentences, beams made of letters, windows of punctuation marks. It was writing itself. And it was using me. I heard a voice. Faint. But real. Not from the void. From the real world. Ethan. I turned. A crack had opened in the blank space. On the other side, my apartment. The real world. Someone was trying to pull me out. Hands reached through, a woman's hands. Familiar. Julia. My sister. She had found my journal. The fragments. The warnings I'd hidden. And now, somehow she was breaking through. But the cabin screamed. A shriek of torn paper and bleeding ink. You cannot leave. You're a chapter. A page. A line too long remembered. I ran. The floor melted into paragraphs, dragging me down. The cabin's roof opened like a maw, spitting syllables and screams. But I didn't stop. I grabbed Julia's hand, and for the first time since this nightmare began, something gave. I woke on the floor of my apartment. Choking. The guest book lay in pieces. Burned, ripped, soaking in rain that hadn't fallen. Julia was beside me. Crying. Holding me. You were gone for days, she said. I looked at the calendar. It was June 24th. 2 weeks gone. But I remembered every second. Now, I write this final part as a warning. To you. If you ever find a guest book in a lonely cabin deep in the woods, don't sign it. Not even as a joke. Because once you do, you're no longer a guest. You're a character. And the story is already writing your end. Final note. A week later, I burned every page I ever wrote. I unplugged every device. Stopped speaking aloud at night. But yesterday I found something in my mailbox. No return address. Inside was a single page. Blank. Except for one line. Another reader has entered the cabin. And underneath that, your name. Yes, you're reading this now. Welcome. You're next. The end. Drop of blood.